Welcome back to the channel. If your wife or girlfriend has a lot of plants, I've got the perfect project for you. Today we'll be building 3 different frame styles with wall-mounted shelves, designed to beautifully frame your plants and clear up that clutter on your windowsills. Our first design uses a simple 5x5cm classic beech wood frame. Before cutting to size, I start by adding an ogee profile. It's better to do this before cutting. Fewer ends means less risk of tear out. I'm adding 45-degree miters to the frame. This looks a little cleaner than a simple butt joint. You can cut them to whatever length you need. It really depends on the size of your plants. When gluing up a mitered frame, you can use painter's tape around each corner to help line everything up tightly. I forgot to do it here, but it still worked out pretty well. The second frame is constructed from 8mm thick oak slats, which I refurbished in an earlier video from beams I found in a house I'm renovating. I'm layering one on top of the other to achieve that old wooden house window look. For the slat design, I'm placing them with a slight offset so they give the impression of radiating outwards on all 4 sides. This gives the frame a nice sense of depth. Here I'm using a circular saw with a straight edge to trim the excess slats. The blade is set at a 45-degree angle. This ensures the front of the frame stays visible, while the rough edges at the back are mostly hidden. Sadly, my circular saw has a pretty small blade, so I switched to the flush trim saw here to continue the cut at the same angle. This frame is a little tricky to sand. I'm using an orbital sander on both the front and back, starting at 80 grit, then 120 and working up to 320. Then I finish with a 120 grit sanding block to clean up the edges and the little recesses. For the final frame design, I'm attaching thin strips of Padauk and oak to a very simple 10cm pine frame. The frame itself isn't really important, as it will be almost invisible in the end. Using a pale wood adds a nice contrast to the strips on the inner frame. Here I'm adding another quick 80 grit sanding to avoid splinters. To join the frame, I'm going the old quick and dirty route. First I pre-drill with a 5mm bit. Then I use an 8mm bit to create a 2cm deep counter bore. I'll use this counterboard to hide the screw heads and reach well into the horizontal sections of the frame with 9 cm screws. I use a table saw to cut 10 mm strips from my oak slats. I then use the miter saw to cut 12 to 14 cm sections from the oak and Padauk strips. I wanted a little variety in the length here, so I'm only roughly measuring. To attach them, a hot glue gun is the quickest and simplest option. In terms of the pattern, I scattered a few oak strips amongst the Padauk, which is the main character in this story. Here I'm adding 8 mm dowels to camouflage the counterboard holes. I then trim off the excess with a flush trim saw. Now that I have the 3 frames, I'm moving on to the floating shelves. It's important to choose a piece of wood that's thick enough to attach the mounting brackets. I've gone for some Scotch pine, as I had some lying around, and it's very easy softwood to work with. I'm rounding the corners on the front face of the shelves. After marking, I use a jigsaw to cut about 1 mm from the line. Then I'll remove any excess material with an orbital sander and 120 grit sandpaper. Finally, I'm adding a chunky round over. This softens the profile and makes it less likely to damage my wife. I'm not touching the side facing the wall, as this needs to be flush. Here I'm using a marking gauge to describe the upper limit for the bracket mounting plate position. I then place the mounting bracket's plate flush against the line and mark around it to determine the exact position and where I'll need to drill the holes for the rods. I'm using a drill press with an 8 mm bit to cut an 11 cm channel for the rods. No harm in going 1 cm deeper than you need here to account for the mounting plate width. Here I'm routing out the reliefs for the bracket mounting plates. Just check your bracket's plate depth and set your router to that depth. Mine were 4 mm. For the finishing, I wanted a matte look to suit the natural vibe of the plants. I just went for a single coat of boiled linseed oil on everything. Here's a little time lapse of the mounting process. I had a very eager helper who was super keen to get our plants up there. And just like that, we're done. My wife now has more space to buy even more plants. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this build. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.